Most cat owners believe the biggest dangers to their cat are obvious things: poisonous plants, open windows, toxic food, the kinds of risks you can clearly see and avoid. But according to animal behaviorists, the real damage often comes from something far quieter: your daily habits. Things you do automatically, without thinking, without realizing that from your cat's perspective, those same moments can slowly chip away at their sense of safety inside their own home. And that's the unsettling part. Because cats don't experience the world the way we do, their brains are built to constantly scan for patterns: tone of voice, body language, environmental predictability. In feline cognition, safety isn't about intention. It's about consistency. If something feels unpredictable, their nervous system remembers, and over time those small moments accumulate. A raised voice, a missing play session, a routine that suddenly disappears. To us it feels like nothing. To a cat it can feel like the ground beneath them shifting, which leads to a difficult truth. Some of the most common things loving cat owners do every day are quietly damaging the bond their cat depends on. In this video we're going to break down 6 everyday habits that can hurt your cat far more than people realize. And the last one on this list is especially painful, because millions of owners do it thinking it proves how independent cats really are. But science says the opposite, and once you understand what your cat is actually feeling in those moments, you may never look at your daily routine the same way again. Every relationship your cat has with you is built on one invisible foundation: predictability. To a human, trust comes from words and intention, but to a cat, trust comes from patterns. Your voice, your movements, the way you approach them, the way the home feels when you walk into a room. Their brain is constantly asking one silent question: is this environment safe? And when the answer is consistently yes, something powerful happens. Cats relax their guard. Their body posture softens. They sleep deeper. They follow you from room to room, not because they need you, because they trust you. But when that predictability breaks even in small ways, the change doesn't always look dramatic. Cats rarely protest loudly. They don't slam doors. They don't argue. Their nervous system simply adapts. A cat that once greeted you might start watching from across the room. A playful cat may begin sleeping more and more. An affectionate cat may suddenly pull away after only a few seconds of contact. Behaviorists see this pattern all the time. When stress hormones like cortisol stay elevated, animals don't always become aggressive. Many simply become quieter, and that silence fools us. We assume everything is fine because nothing seems obviously wrong, but inside your cat's brain, every interaction is being catalogued: safe, uncertain, or threatening. Which brings us to the first habit almost every cat owner has done at least once. You catch your cat knocking something off the counter, and without thinking, you raise your voice. Picture the moment. You walk into the kitchen and see your cat slowly sliding a glass toward the edge of the counter. One more tap, and it crashes to the floor. Your reaction is instant. Hey! Your voice jumps. Loud, sharp. Maybe you even say their name. To you, it feels like a normal correction. A quick burst of frustration. Something meant to stop the behavior, but inside your cat's brain, something very different is happening. Cats don't process cause and effect the same way humans do. They're not thinking, I knocked over the glass, so my human is upset. Their brain makes a much simpler association. The human suddenly became loud and unpredictable. Behavior research published in the Journal of Veterinary Behavior has shown that cats exposed to frequent yelling display significantly higher levels of chronic stress. Over time, those stress responses can show up as hiding, aggression, or even litter box avoidance. Not because the cat is being difficult, because their nervous system has started labeling you as emotionally unpredictable. And that's the heartbreaking part. You weren't trying to scare them, you were reacting. But cats don't evaluate intention, they read energy. To them, trust sounds like a calm voice. Safety sounds like consistency. And when a human explodes out of nowhere, even for a second, the message their brain records is simple: this environment might not always be safe. A cat won't argue about it. They'll just remember. Now let's talk about something far less obvious, but just as damaging: a cat that never gets to hunt. When most people picture a happy indoor cat, they imagine something calm: a cat that naps all day, lounges on the couch, and quietly watches the room. Low maintenance. Easy. But what looks peaceful on the outside can actually be a brain that's been slowly shutting down from boredom, because biologically, cats aren't designed to simply exist in a space. They're designed to hunt. Inside your cat's brain lives a hardwired sequence: stalk, chase, pounce, capture. When that cycle completes, their brain releases dopamine and satisfaction hormones tied to survival success. It's the feline version of emotional fulfillment. When that cycle never happens, something subtle begins to change. A study published in the Journal of Feline Medicine and Surgery found that cats deprived of regular predatory play showed higher rates of obesity, irritability, and compulsive behaviors like over-grooming. But the saddest part is how it often looks to the owner. You come home, your cat is asleep again, curled up in the same spot, quiet, calm, and you think, wow, my cat is so easy. But sometimes that cat isn't relaxed. They're mentally understimulated. Imagine locking an athlete in a quiet room with nothing to do for weeks. Eventually, they stop trying to move. Not because they're lazy, because their brain has stopped expecting excitement. And in about a minute, we're going to reveal something even more surprising. One of the most responsible things owners do every day might be slowly damaging their cat's body from the inside. Before we move to the next habit, there's a question almost no cat owner asks themselves. Not about toys, not about litter, not about litter, not about training, about food, because feeding your cat feels like the most responsible thing you do every day. Bowl down, kibble poured, cat eats, routine complete. But what if the food you've been giving your cat for years is quietly working against their biology? Here's the strange evolutionary twist. Cats didn't evolve near rivers or water sources like many animals. Their ancestors were desert predators, which means their bodies adapted to get most of their hydration from prey, not from drinking water. In other words, their thirst drive is naturally weak. Behavioral physiologists call this a low voluntary drinking response. Even when water is available, many cats simply don't drink enough to fully hydrate themselves. Now think about what dry kibble contains, roughly 10% moisture. Compare that to a mouse, bird, or small prey animal, which contains about 70% water. That's a massive biological gap. A long-term study published in the Journal of the American Veterinary Medical Association found that cats fed dry-only diets consume significantly less total water than cats eating wet food. And over time, that subtle dehydration places extra strain on the kidneys and urinary system, which leads to something heartbreaking. Kidney disease is one of the leading causes of death in older cats, and the most quotable truth here is simple. A cat can look fine for years while their body slowly runs dry. You don't have to eliminate kibble completely, but sometimes the smallest change, like adding wet food a few times a week, can give your cat's body something it was biologically designed for. Now here's a moment every cat owner recognizes. Your cat jumps onto the couch beside you. They curl their tail around their body, lean into your hand, and begin to purr. So naturally, you start petting them, a few strokes down the back, maybe a little belly rub. Everything seems perfect. And then suddenly, chomp, you pull your hand back, confused. What was that for? It feels random, almost like your cat switched personalities mid-moment. But from your cat's perspective, nothing about that interaction was random. Cats have incredibly sensitive skin packed with nerve endings. Those nerves can shift from pleasant to overwhelming extremely fast. Behaviorists call this petting-induced overstimulation. In simple terms, what starts as enjoyable contact can quickly cross a sensory threshold. A study from the University of Lincoln found that cats consistently show the lowest stress responses when touched around the cheeks, chin, and base of the ears. But when humans focused on the belly or the base of the tail, stress hormones spiked much faster. And here's where the emotional twist happens. When a cat rolls over and exposes their belly, most people interpret it as an invitation. But in feline communication, that gesture usually means something else entirely. I trust you enough to be vulnerable around you, not please rub my stomach. When we ignore that signal and dive in with enthusiastic petting, the cat's nervous system gets overwhelmed. So they bite not out of anger, out of self-protection. A cat's body is basically saying, I still like you, but that was too much. And the moment you learn to respect that boundary, something amazing happens. Cats often stay close longer. Now let's talk about something most cat owners hide, literally, the litter box. Take a second and picture where yours is right now. Maybe it's tucked behind the washing machine. Maybe it's in the basement. Maybe it's squeezed into a dark corner of the bathroom where no one has to see it. From a human perspective, that makes perfect sense. Litter boxes aren't exactly decorative. We hide them to keep the house looking clean. but to your cat, their hidden corner can feel like the most dangerous place in the entire home. Cats live with a strange biological duality. They are predators, but they are also prey, and that means their brain is always calculating escape routes, especially during vulnerable moments. And using the litter box is one of the most vulnerable positions a cat can be in. Their attention drops, their posture lowers, their ability to react quickly is reduced. In the wild, that's exactly when an attack could happen. So their brain instinctively asks two questions. Can I see what's coming? And can I escape if I need to? When a litter box is shoved into a tight corner with only one path in and out, those survival alarms quietly activate. Behavior research in applied animal behavior science has repeatedly shown that litter box placement and accessibility are major factors behind elimination problems. In other words, when a cat starts peeing outside the box, they might not be rebelling. They might just be scared. And here's the rule many behaviorists recommend. Number of cats in the house, +1. 2 cats, 3 boxes. Because when a cat feels they always have options, their brain finally relaxes. Here's something far less visible than a litter box, but just as powerful inside a cat's mind. Routine. To humans, routines feel flexible. Dinner can happen a little later. Playtime can wait until tomorrow. Some days we're busy, some days we're not. But cats experience time very differently. Their brains are extremely sensitive to predictable cycles. Feeding times, activity windows, sleep patterns, even the moments you usually walk through the door. Neuroscientists studying animal behavior have found that predictable routines help regulate cortisol, the hormone tied to stress and uncertainty. In simple terms, routine tells a cat's brain the world is stable. Now imagine that pattern suddenly changing. One day dinner arrives at 6, the next day at 9, the next day not until midnight. Playtime disappears for a week. Your schedule shifts. The house feels different. To us, that's normal life, but to a cat, it can feel like the rules of the universe just broke. You might notice subtle changes. A cat pacing near the food bowl, sitting by the door earlier and earlier each evening, becoming unusually vocal or restless. They're not being dramatic. They're trying to re-establish predictability, because in the feline brain, routine equals security. One behaviorist once summarized it perfectly. A cat doesn't measure love in words, they measure it in patterns, and when those patterns disappear too often, their nervous system starts living in a quiet state of uncertainty. Which leads us to the final habit on this list, and this one is especially heartbreaking, because it's based on one of the biggest myths people believe about cats. For decades, people have repeated the same sentence about cats. They're independent, they don't really care if you're around, they're nothing like dogs. It's one of the most persistent myths in pet culture, and unfortunately it's also one of the most harmful. Because modern research has revealed something surprising about the feline mind. Cats form attachment bonds. In 2019, researchers studying feline behavior used a test originally designed for human infants called the Secure Base Test. The results, later published in Current Biology, showed that many cats displayed attachment patterns strikingly similar to those seen in babies and dogs. When the human left the room, their stress increased. When their human returned, their behavior changed depending on the strength of the bond. Some cats relaxed immediately, others stayed cautious. But the key discovery was undeniable. Your cat doesn't just live with you. Your cat doesn't just live with you. Your cat bonds with you, which makes the next habit especially important to understand. Because millions of loving owners unknowingly believe their cat is perfectly fine spending long stretches alone. 10 hours, 12 hours, sometimes longer. You come home, the cat is sleeping on the couch, and everything seems normal. But cats evolved to hide vulnerability. When something feels wrong emotionally, they rarely act out dramatically. Instead, they withdraw. Over time, prolonged isolation can show up as overgrooming, appetite changes, reduced play, or sudden clinginess. Not because your cat became needy, but because the creature they built their world around keeps disappearing. And this is where something subtle but important can begin to happen. A cat that once greeted you at the door might start staying under the table. A playful cat might stop chasing toys they used to love. An affectionate cat might suddenly tolerate only a few seconds of contact before walking away. Most owners assume it's just personality. Maybe my cat is getting older. Maybe they're just moody. But behaviorists often look at those same changes and see something else entirely. Emotional fatigue. Cats are extremely skilled at masking distress. In the wild, showing weakness makes you a target. That instinct never disappeared in domestic cats, so when something is wrong emotionally, they rarely scream for attention. They shrink their world instead. A cat experiencing prolonged loneliness or unpredictable interaction may stop initiating play, stop seeking contact, and spend longer periods hiding or sleeping. From the outside, it looks peaceful. Inside their nervous system, it's something closer to withdrawal. And here's the quiet fear trigger every cat owner should know. When a cat's behavior changes suddenly, especially if they become distant, overly quiet, or unusually irritable, it's rarely random. It's usually communication. A cat's personality doesn't disappear overnight, but their sense of security can, which is why the most powerful thing you can give a cat isn't expensive toys, luxury beds, or fancy food. It's something far simpler: your presence. When people imagine a cat's world, they usually picture something small: a few rooms, a window, a couch, maybe a scratching post in the corner. But inside your cat's mind, their world is organized very differently. It revolves around you. Your footsteps, your voice, your routines. In animal behavior science, this is called a secure base relationship, the same pattern seen between infants and caregivers. One individual becomes the anchor that makes the environment feel predictable and safe. For many cats, that anchor is their human, which means when you walk through the door, something subtle happens in their brain. Their vigilance drops, their muscles relax, their environment suddenly feels stable again, not because they're dependent, but because they trust you, and that trust grows through incredibly small moments. A few minutes of play, sitting beside them instead of walking past, letting them lean into your hand without overstimulating them. Those tiny interactions regulate their emotional state. One behaviorist explained it perfectly. To you, it's 5 minutes of attention. To your cat, it's reassurance that their world is still safe. And here's a question worth asking yourself tonight. If your cat could speak for just 1 minute, what would they say they love most about the way you treat them? Drop it in the comments, because sometimes the smallest change in how we show up for them becomes the biggest change in their entire world.